lately, I have found myself, and this is just recently, last few months, maybe 6 months, I don't know how long it's been building, but I found myself setting a rather ridiculous standard to the knives that I carry. I've only been carrying knives that were hair whittling sharp. So I would pick up a knife in the morning, something from my rotation, and I would check the edge against the hair. And if the knife wasn't hair whittling sharp, I would strop it. 1 micron strop, 4 micron strop. And if it came back up to hair whittling, then I would carry the knife. And if it didn't, then I would set it aside for resharpening. Now, the idea of that, just the concept of that is a little bit ridiculous. A perfectly valid argument against setting that kind of standard to the knives that you carry is that with steels like S90V, S30V, M4, you're paying for part of what you're paying for with the steels is the cutting edge of the blade, the edge retention of the steel. And part of that is the working edge. So if the only thing that you're dealing with in your carry is a hair whittling edge, you're cutting out a lot of the lifespan of the edge of its functional cutting time. So I don't hold any debate against that argument. I'm not even sure how I got started with that habit relative to my carry. What was significant about it, once I really started doing it, was that I noticed that there was a lot of knives, a lot of steels that held a hair whittling edge longer than you would expect, longer than I would expect. In a lot of cases, it was weeks or longer that knives were continuing to whittle hair. Now, that's fine. I was enthusiastic about it. I thought that was great. I thought it was great performance. And I talked about it. I talked about it online. I talked about it on Instagram. And that was fine. That was what it was. I think it started some discussions, and I even saw it bleed into some other people's videos, some other sharpeners. People started addressing the subject, giving their thoughts on it. And that's fine. That is what it is. But I mean, in some cases, it got a little ridiculous. I mean, for instance, the River's Edge Cutlery exclusive Para 3 in CTS 204P. I had gotten that knife and I had sharpened it for review, and I carried it for quite a long time. And there were several times that I sat down to sharpen that knife. And if I sit down to sharpen something, I'll usually check the edge before I sharpen it, just make sure. And if the edge is still hair whittling, then I don't sharpen the knife. If it isn't hair whittling, then I'll resharpen it. Again, I'm not arguing that you shouldn't give some time to a working edge on a knife. These are just my own habits that are there for better or worse. But the several times that I checked the River's Edge Cutlery Para 3, it was still hair whittling sharp. And this was after a significant amount of carry and a significant amount of use. I mean, I'm sitting down to sharpen the knife and I'm saying, this shouldn't still be whittling hair. This should be done. This is due for a sharpening, and it just kept going. I was discussing that with another sharpener, and to demonstrate, to him, just, in discussion, the edge was still whittling hair, I sat down in my kitchen table, and so not this setting, but my kitchen table, and I set a flashlight shining across and pulled one of my wife's hairs off my jacket and showed him that, recorded to show that the knife was still hair whittling, and then was going to send him the video. This was the video footage that I got. Now, in that video footage, the knife whittled the hair 15 times. I mean, that's excessive for a new edge, for a brand new edge. And at the time that I recorded that edge was several months old. The knife had been carried and it had been used. It was a little bit shocking. I mean, the whole thing. I've gone back and looked at the sharpening that I did for the review, which was the last time that edge had been sharpened, and with different steels, played around a little bit with mimicking that sharpening just to see if there was anything to it. But all of this discussion and thought on the subject really got me thinking, if I can see this in use and I can see this in carry, I should be able to test it. I wanted to try and test it. I wanted to try and quantify it. Because if I was able to do that to any degree, if I was able to quantify the phenomenon, then maybe I could find variables. Maybe I could find contributing factors. And that was interesting. I mean, if you're looking at sharpening, the idea of sharpening and doing it as to the best degree that you can, it's not just about your level of sharpness, and it's surely not about aesthetics. It can be about aesthetics, but sharp first, then pretty. But the other aspect is a healthy edge. And that was something I started talking about a while back. The idea of a healthy edge and what that means. There's several aspects to an edge being healthy, but what plays into that isn't just the level of sharpness. It's also edge longevity, it's edge stability, toughness. And these are concepts that a sharpener should be addressing. It's what we should be going after. I decided to start testing edge longevity of high sharpness. I was doing the testing with CPM M4, Spyderco Mantra in CPM M4, a very sharpened down, very used Spyderco Mantra. The testing was being done on cardboard. I've spent several months on this almost exclusively to this, just testing at a constant pace, a weekly basis, sometimes 2 tests a week, 6 tests a week. I mean, just repeating the process over and over again, trying different stone combinations, trying different sharpening techniques, trying to see if I could pick out variables or find things that surprised me with it. It seems as if a better execution of the basics is very much a good way to get to where you want to be on this subject. But there are some contributing factors that are worth discussing. Now, as far as results go, I mean, before I go any farther, I was finding mixed results, and it was difficult to really put my finger on too many different aspects that would influence things. As far as the results are concerned, there was times where I was getting 20 feet. And mind you, with this testing, this is sharpen the knife, bring it to hair whittling, cut cardboard, strop it, cut cardboard, strop it, check the edge against the hair. Strop could be a 4 micron strop, a 1 micron strop. No more than 30 to 45 seconds of stropping before you check the edge against the hair. You're not going to sit there and strop for an hour. This is just to mimic the carry that I was doing. So, and see how many feet of cardboard you could go through before the edge was too far gone to be brought back by a strop. Also, if you're cutting with the entire edge, you're checking the hair on the part of the blade that you're using. What you're not doing is cutting 150 feet with the middle of the blade and only stropping with the top. All right, that's false. I or anybody else are lying to you at that point. So you're checking over the entire course of the blade to see if it's still whittling hair. In some cases, I was getting 20 feet. In some cases, I was getting 40 feet, 60 feet, 90 feet. But it was hard to pinpoint what influenced that. there was some contributing factors. One of the things that I think is a major contributing factor is using the proper abrasives and sharpening. I thought that that was something that was worth discussing here. The idea of proper abrasives and what's right for the steel. You get into the subject of carbide tear out, the subject of what carbides are within a given steel. So there's different people on different sides of the line with carbide tear out and what people think about it. I do not have any doubt in my mind that carbide tear out is a phenomenon that happens. I don't have any doubt in my mind that it contributes to how healthy an edge is or how unhealthy an edge is. What we're talking about here when we start going down the road with this, as far as an edge being unhealthy, what you're talking about is you're talking about an edge that's not as sharp, an edge that's not going to stay sharp as long. I think that it can affect toughness or resistance to chipping in an edge. An example of that, an example of an unhealthy edge not being able to resist chipping, is if you're consistently doing touch-ups on your knife. So take a steel like ZDP 189 and just do consistent touch-ups on it with an ultra-fine stone instead of a full sharpening. It's not going to take that long before you start getting chipping on the edge. You're leaving fatigue steel on the edge. It's an unhealthy edge. You're not using the proper abrasives. Now, that's a case of not using the proper abrasives where it's not about carbide tear out. You're just not doing a full sharpening to remove fatigue steel from the edge. I'm not sure that with a steel like S90V, 10V class steel, something like Maximet, something like S110V, something like Rex 121, I'm not sure that using the wrong abrasives can't fatigue the steel in and of itself. Now, that's a whole nother subject, and really we see that more with Maximet than anything, than 10V class steels. Maximet is above a 10V class steel, but with Maximet, you can have the edge go nuts on the stones and start falling apart. And I think that's a matter of fatigue, and I think the edge gets fatigued from the stones itself. That's a very controversial subject. People don't want to talk about that. People don't even really know what to think about it. And I don't have any proof of it. That's just something I'm kicking around in my head. But I have a feeling that that's the case. Be that as it is, you look at a steel like S90V, you don't see the same phenomenon of the edge falling apart if you're using the wrong kind of stone. But I don't think you're doing the steel any favors. You may be fatiguing it on some smaller level. If you are fatiguing it on some smaller level, you wouldn't see chipping in the edge, but what you would see is lower edge retention, maybe less resistance to impact, but you're not going to see the edge longevity. And that's really where I'm going with this, with carbide tear out. There are people that say carbide tear out doesn't exist, and I've seen tests of it and that kind of thing. I've been doing this long enough, and I pay enough attention with it, that I have no doubt in my mind that carbide tear out absolutely is something that goes on. Or at least that some stones, alumina-based stones, don't work well on high vanadium steels. Now, I'm not real concerned with what somebody in a lab says. I mean, like I said, I don't have any doubt in my mind. I know from the performance I see using the proper abrasives and from the lack of performance I see using the wrong abrasives, I know that it makes a difference what you're using. As far as testing it goes, I have tested it. I've tested it in the past, and I've tested it recently. When I tested it recently, I did it with S90V and I did it with K390. I ran the test. For the sharpening, I tried to mimic the grits between the alumina stones and the diamond stones. The diamond is hard enough to cut vanadium carbide. Alumina is not. That's the issue here, right? So I tried my best to match up the grits. As for the strops, for the alumina sharpening, I use slurry from alumina stones. I used a sharpening progression in both cases, cutting cardboard 30 inclusive, with the knives at a high sharpness. I did my best with the alumina. Here's a news flash. Steels like S90V don't want to get that sharp based off a sharpening with alumina stones. They just don't. They don't work that good. But I still took them very far. With the alumina sharpening, S90V cut 310 inches of cardboard before it would stop shaving hair. With the diamond sharpening, S90V cut 730 inches. With K390, with the alumina sharpening, K390 cut 915 inches of cardboard, and with the diamond sharpening, it cut 4,046 inches. That's quite a difference between the two, both with S90V and especially with K390. If you're bothering to spend your money on a steel like S90V or K390, if you're using the wrong abrasives and lowering the edge retention, it's kind of a waste to bother with the steel in the first place. And as far as testing of, trying to test for carbide tear out, trying to show it, there's something significant that should probably be mentioned. The phenomenon of carbide tear out doesn't show itself in edge retention unless you take the edge down to a very fine level. And this is nothing new. I mean, this is old news. Cliff Stamp covered this in 2013. So anybody who's claiming to be doing carbide tear out testing, trying to prove or disprove the phenomenon, who's didn't find this, really wasn't paying attention. If all you're using is a coarse stone and you're trying to show carbide tear out or a lack thereof, it's a big waste of time. Your carbide will hide within the scratch pattern on the knife. Anybody doing that, making claims that they're disproving carbide tear out, doesn't know what they're doing. So you have to take the knife edge down to a fine level. Hence, I did with my test. That's why. But as far as a healthy edge goes and better performance of the edge, I think that it's absolutely necessary to use the right abrasives. This is Spyderco Native in S90V with a laminated blade. It's S90V, CPM 154, carbon fiber handle scales. Peel ply carbon fiber, full steel liners, full steel backing. It's a nice knife. It's Saber Grind. I hesitated on getting it for a while because it's Saber Grind. It's got a thicker blade, more stout. Knife Center put it up for sale, and that eventually wore me down, so I went ahead and picked it up. Knife Center had a good deal on it. The Saber Grind is a flat saber as opposed to a hollow saber, so it is very thick behind the edge. But something about the idea of a strong, stout little folder with very high wear resistance on the edge, something about that appealed to me. I wanted to put the knife through some use. I wanted to put it up against the fluted carbon fiber Native in S90V, cutting on some cardboard, just seeing how much of a difference I could feel in the performance of the edge. I'm not going to say there was no difference, but this did fine. It was functional. After the cardboard, I moved on to wood. I worked with a pine board that I had chewed on with some other knives at different times, and I chewed away at that until I went all the way through it. I was surprised how well this knife was able to slice into the wood. It did very, very good given the geometry that's there. After that, I wanted to test the tip a little bit, so I just drilled straight into the board with the knife in several different spots, and the tip didn't blink. I mean, it could care less about the wood. Now, this was just soft pine from a hardware store, but still, I mean, there was no issue with the knife at all. After that, being that I had done all this with the factory edge, I wanted to test the edge a little bit and see how well it did at fine cuts in wood. So I worked with the wood a little bit more, just seeing how the edge held up given that use. I don't know, maybe if you had this in a camping situation or something like that, after a significant amount of cutting, could you still get some fine cuts in wood to use as kindling or something? But the knife did fine. I really didn't have any complaints with it. I needed to sharpen the knife to get it back in my pocket. I started with DMT diamond plates, starting with a coarse plate. I worked through the coarse and moved on to a fine, and I moved on to a medium extra fine. I'm enjoying the medium extra fine very much. I picked it up a little while back, and it's been excellent so far. So I'm sure I'll have more to talk about on that in the future, but at the moment I am enjoying the medium extra fine a lot. It's kind of hard to find, and it's kind of an oddball plate with a funny name to it, but I am liking it. After that, I moved on to Ken Schwartz 3K diamond plate. I worked with that. The Ken Schwartz 3K leaves a finer finish than even the extra fine, regardless of their grit rating. I mean, I don't care about that. I'm talking about the finish that it leaves on the edge. After Ken Schwartz 3K plate, I moved on to a Spyderco ultra fine. I worked with that. That was no problem. Brought up the bite on the edge, and then moved on to strops. I moved through a series of strops, and when all was said and done, the edge that came up on the knife was absolutely hair-whittling sharp. It was very much what I wanted out of the edge, out of the sharpening. I really had no complaints about it. I really enjoy the way S90V comes up for me. So I just wanted to get some discussion in about sharpening and about steel. I like this model. It's interesting. It is a very stout little folder, but I like it. I like the Native very much, and I think that this variation of it has a place in my carry. I'm interested to see where I go with this in the future. I mean, I would think that the edge bevel is going to widen as it gets sharpened more and more, so that'll be an issue of it in and of itself. I can work down the sides with a stone. I could send this out to have it reground. I mean, Big Brown Bear is doing some amazing work with regrinds, so I could always ask him for some help with it. The other thing that's crossed my mind is, I mean, this is stout enough that I could blend this into the Saber Grind and just convex down. So let the Saber Grind, the Saber Flat, come down and then just work its way into a convex along the edge bevel the entire length. That might be interesting, and the idea of convexing the edge seems oddly appropriate. So not sure what I'm going to do yet. I think I'll just play it by ear. But I am enjoying the model, and I think that Spyderco did a good job with it.